the hero of Glymmsforge. Captain Malign, civil engineer turned leader of the Glymmsforge South Gators, scowled at the lumpy froth in his flagon. He had long ago pushed away the meal that Gertie had left for him. More bloody fish. He was sick of it. Better a liquid meal, he had thought, and damn the morning after. Another night off duty spent at the Black Cat. It was getting to be too much of a habit. They knew him here, at least, knew what he had done for the city. He had told them often enough. But did he get a minstrel's song to commemorate his deeds? Like that privileged archnocrat, Nossian? Perhaps a silver statue, like the oh-so-humble Seraphim held it, darling of the city. But no, he did not. Poor, disfigured old Malign got a draughty room in the gatehouse, painful bunions from all the walking, and the occasional pint of cheap sweet black bought by one of his men. Sigma had his chosen ones, and Vorgan Malign had not been among them. The anvils of the Heldenhammer, too obsessed with their own rites and antique rituals to answer his calls for a war council, had defended the East Gate. They were storm-cast Eternals, a force no mortal man could hope to match. They had hurled the undead hordes besieging the city back into the wastes, and kept the city's blessed 12-pointed arcanogram unbroken, so that the stealth geists couldn't get in. But so had Malign, and the men of the city's south. He and his lads had held it against the slender knight's undead riders, with nothing more extravagant than hidden moats, mist-shrouded spikefields, and, at the last, a triple pincer charge led by mounted warrior priests. That was his finest hour, even with the death toll. It had taken a lot of planning, bravado, and more than a little luck to pull it off. It should have been worth a song, or a verse, at least in Nossian Glymm's fancy ballad. But it seemed that cunning, resourcefulness, and a flair for traps were not qualities good enough for a two-penny minstrel, let alone the God-King and the realm of heavens. "Rot unto them," muttered Malign, "rot in dust unto 'em all." He drained his pint, slurping down the dregs with a grimace. Resting his head on his arms for a minute, he let his eyes droop as his soul sank into a pool of pity and despair. The barren desert stretched out before him, cold winds whispering in a language he did not understand. There, silhouetted against the tallest dune, was the deathly rider, clad in a flapping grave shroud. It beckoned to him as it always did. He heard its voice in his head, the promise it always made. "By the dunes of lost Nihikara," it whispered in Malign own voice, "I am thine." The vision faded away. A powerful urge to urinate suddenly made itself known, and Malign stood upright with a slight stagger, banging his kneecap on the underside of the table in his haste not to disgrace himself. He weaved his way towards the rear of the tavern, shouldering next to a tall guard, and relieving himself in a steaming yellow arc that splashed over his boots, and a little over those of the guard next to him. He turned away quickly, making himself decent, and made hastily through the rear door into the alley before things turned sour. Sour was about all he had left, thought Malign, these days. No wife, no family, not since the last incursion of the dead. Even his cat, Threepaws, had died, turned stiff and white after hissing at a lurkergeist in the dark woods around Glassmere. Now he had only memories, and the pity of those who still had lives worth living. He staggered into the city. He passed the silver statue of the woman who had once been simply Seraphim held it, and was now so much more. He felt the bitterness rise up to choke him, and made to spit at the statue's feet. But his mouth was dry, and the goblet of spittle swung from his lower lip like a pendulum, reluctant to detach. He wiped it on his sleeve and meandered on, heart swimming with shame, eyes pricking hot with tears. It was the smoke, he told himself, the smoke of the day's corpses, irritating his eyes. Nothing more. That night, in his flea-infested bunk, Captain Malign dreamed fitfully. He dreamed of screaming skull-like faces in the sky, of a vast impossible pyramid suspended over a bottomless pit, a rustling bone-dry voice whispering on the cold, cutting wind that rushed towards that very abyss. With the strange logic of dreams, he knew who was speaking to him, for he had spoken to him before and would likely do so again. His mother had told him about this whisperer many times when he was a child, too curious about the world to go to sleep. It was the voice of Elderbones, a wizard king from the olden days of Shyish, who was famous before Lyria had ever been named, let alone Glymmsforge. Despite the whisper being on the cusp of hearing, he could feel the voice resonating into his skull, every syllable seeping into his bones. "You deserve respect," the voice said. "You deserve to be obeyed, just as I do. Obeyed without question." Part of Malign found itself in agreement. "A new order is coming," said the voice. "I have chosen you to lead, as well as to follow, in that new worldscape. Open the way. Dig out the purple sand from the organogram at the south gate. Replace it with sand of the same hue, and leave." Malign frowned and muttered in his sleep, not quite understanding, but feeling some manner of kinship nonetheless. "I am no false god, no warrior elevated above his station. I am a king, and though my rightful domain has fallen, it will rise again, and such as yours will open the way until Sigmar and his golden fools are put back in their place forevermore." The slumbering captain knew, somehow, that Elderbones understood what it felt to be supplanted, to be overruled, to have what was rightfully his snatched away. Perhaps he wasn't a figure of terror, after all. Perhaps he was just a man, a lost soul, misunderstood and longing for what should have been his all along. This one he could follow. This one would give him his rightful due. The old captain turned in his bunk, pulled his threadbare blanket across his back, and dreamed of finally getting the laurels he so richly deserved. A new dawn would be here, soon enough.